Thanks for having me. I'm Gustav from KILT, and I promised to talk a bit about use cases and adoption for KILT. And I will probably just directly hop into it. First of all, as I'm the legal guy, legal note, this is not a perspective and not investment advice, and just today's views of our project. First, the agenda. I want to go a bit into the faces of the internet as such, then talk about identity, because KILT protocol is about identity. Then show you a bit how KILT protocol is thought through, and then jump into 3 use cases, the Deloitte use case, social KYC, and the Axel Springer login credential. Faces of the internet, probably most of you already know that. There was a first phase that was just purely reading, where you could look at home pages and were basically not included at all. Then there was the writing phase with apps growing on top of the first layer, where you could participate and store and compute and participate, basically. And now we are in the 3rd phase, which we celebrate very much, because we finally get to own our own stuff. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Yes, I forgot. Sorry. I'm here, sorry. So now we own our stuff that we create on the internet, and that's not only true for coins, as everybody knows already, but also for all kinds of other things. We are active in the identity part of ownership, and we are trying to provide easy-to-use solutions to own your identity online. So what we want to do is we want to repair the fundamental mistakes of the Web 2 by adding functionalities that are easy to use and giving the control to people. Our field is identity, but of course there are all kinds of other functionalities that are added by other people, trying to create a level playing field, protecting data and being user-friendly and cheap. Identity, what is identity? I'm Gustav, this is my identity. What you can see here is an identifier, it's my face. If you meet me out there and you want to identify me, you probably look at my face and then you think, oh, that's Gustav. Identity is not only who I am, but also what I am. So I am all kinds of things. I grew up somewhere, I read stuff, I like mountains, I like wine, I like universities. And all of that is part of my identity. But identity is not only what I think I am, but also what others confirm about me. So I do have all kinds of credentials that would tell you my actual name, would tell you where I studied, would tell you how much money I have, or what kind of credibility I have with banks or other third parties. So we need credentials that confirm who we are and what we are and who trusts us and for what reasons. One of the easiest use cases that probably most of us know is you want to go and buy a bottle of wine, and you might need to be over 16. I don't know how it is here in Prague. It's probably also 16. So the first thing that someone would know, they want a credential that proves that the person who's buying that wine is over 16. And the next step, of course, is to look if the credential matches the person. So you would look at my face and see if my face and my credential sort of match. And then they would check if that's a valid credential. So I could use a fake ID or I could use a real ID. But if the credential seems to be valid, and the age matches and the face matches, then I get my bottle of wine. The system that we have in this offline world is, it's called asymmetric trust, so there's no connection between the issuer and the verifier, so the shop owner that wants to sell me a bottle of wine does not need to call the government to find out if I'm actually the person or if I can be trusted to be 16. They just look at the credential, and the issuer of the credential does not participate in the identity transaction at all. That's good, because that gives me privacy. I don't want everyone to know how much I drink or buy or whatever. How does KILT protocol come into that? KILT protocol is an identity blockchain. It's a Polkadot parachain, as some of you might know. And we are working with decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials in order to provide secure, practical solutions for enterprise and consumers around identity. And the process that we thought about is pretty much the same process that we all know from the real world. So we are trying to build a process where the issuer of a credential is not involved into the transaction where I verify my identity, so to have privacy. And all that comes as open source software. We built a protocol that anyone can use free of charge as open source software, and you can use it for any kind of identity that you want to verify. So how does that work? In the center of everything that we do, there is an identity, and this identity has an identifier. This identifier is the DID. As you can see, it's like a digital fingerprint that serves as identification to a person. And to that DID, credentials can be added. So if I don't know, if I go to the government and the government would issue me such a credential, I could add it to a DID. If the government doesn't do that and other people have verified me in any way, then they can issue a credential, and if someone trusts that credential, they will trust that whatever the credential says is true about me. So we are bringing back the process from the physical world to the digital world through decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials. DIDs are a standardized way to have identifiers that enable verification and that are made in a decentralized way. And these are the basis for adding the credentials to your identity in KILT. So how does it work? The decentralized identities managed by a permissionless blockchain, the KILT blockchain. We are using standardized DIDs and verifiable credentials to build a user-friendly application layer for creation, management, and verification of those DIDs and verifiable credentials. So we are using a KILT SDK on which you can build decentralized applications that are cost-efficient, privacy secure, more secure than Web 2, and more flexible and user-friendly than Web 2 applications are. If we look at how identity was handled and still is handled in Web 2, you can see that there's a claimer who has something like credentials, but the credentials aren't matched by themselves, but they are provided and used through a platform. So if you use your Facebook login, for example, then Facebook always knows what you're doing. They're sending you an email that someone used your Facebook credential, and they are tracking that, and off that data they make money and they send you advertisement, and that's actually not convenient. So when we think about digital identity in Web 3, there's a lot of pre-work to be done first. So there's the Decentralized Identity Foundation, that has done the standardization. We are also building on top of Kusama and Polkadot. Then we launched KILT, and on top of that, all kind of proof of concepts and credential solutions are being built or have already been launched. And some of those I want to show you later. So when you compare to what we saw before, we have the user in the center, the user is holding the key, the user is holding the credentials, and they get the credentials from somewhere, but whenever they use it with a verifier, they use it themselves, and the issuer, the attester, does not know about that. So around this concept, there are a few use cases that I would like to show you that have been, why does it not work? That have been built on top of KILT. That's just 3 examples. There, of course, others are being built as well, but I think these give a very good overview about how these credentials might be used and what they are actually bringing to the world. So we have 3 use cases that I want to show you today. It's the Deloitte use case, social KYC, and Axel Springer. These are 3 different types of credentials with a different level of identification behind it. So the lowest one is the login credential that Axel Springer is building. That's actually made to give you access to all kinds of media with a login just as usable as a Facebook login, but self-sovereign. There's the social KYC credential, which is a credential that shows someone that you're actually behind some social accounts like Twitter or Telegram or whatever. And there's a Deloitte use case that is a trusted KYC for regulatory compliance. So we have on the left side, we have some kind of attester that attests your credential, and then the user can use that credential for all kind of different use cases, and the use cases themselves have to determine what kind of credential they, and the use cases themselves have to determine which kind of credential they require in order to make sure that you are the person that you are saying you are. So what does the Deloitte use case do, and who is Deloitte? So Deloitte is one of the big 4 accounting firms, so it's one of the huge trusted entities in the world around accounting and business. What is a KYC? A KYC is a process that defines, that shows who you are. So you normally go to a bank and they say we require a KYC, and a KYC would then normally be that you are showing your passport and proof of your address or whatever, and that can be online or offline depending on regulatory procedures. Usually there are now online KYC credentials as well, and what is new is that it's a reusable credential for a certain process, but also for different verifiers afterwards. So how does it work? We have, on the one side, we have the user, they're holding their wallet, we have Deloitte as someone who's doing something, and we have the KILT blockchain. So the user has a wallet, and wants to manage their credentials. What happens first is that Deloitte will do some KYC process, as you have done it multiple times for all kind of purposes. That happens outside of the protocol, but if the KYC process is done, Deloitte will issue a credential to the user. Next, Deloitte will anchor the credential on the blockchain, and if for some reason or other they ever find out that the credential is not true anymore, they can also revoke it. So that could be that an ID was fake, but it could also be that someone has become a person that's not trusted anymore, or that's on the run or whatever. Then they will just revoke the credential, and then if the user would ever show it, it would be marked as revoked. The user now, with their wallet, can go to a verifier for any kind of purposes. Could be a bank or a telephone company or a coin sale or whatever, and share their credential to make sure that they can prove who they are. And the verifier then checks the validity of the credential in the KILT blockchain, which means that they check, is that a true Deloitte credential or has it been issued by someone else that I don't trust? And they check if it's still there and not revoked. Why is this revolutionary? It's opening up all kinds of new business cases on two sides, and in the middle there's the user who is using a credential without being followed around by someone. So on the Deloitte side, they are issuing that reusable credential, and with that they are monetizing the global trust they own. So if the user comes and says, I want a credential, they will probably say it costs X amount of fiat or whatever, because they need to check, they need to look at the passport, they probably have a video ident, or whatever they do, depends on their processes. And for that, the user will pay a one-time fee, but they will get a credential that they can then use for all kinds of use cases. And on the other side, all these businesses who are currently doing KYC processes with you and investing a lot of money into that can then, because they trust Deloitte and because they trust the Deloitte credential, they can just look at that credential and trust you. So we have new business models on one side, easier on self-owned proof on the other side, and we have a chance of compliance with regulation through a blockchain-readable KYC, and that's probably also true for decentralized services that currently don't have much access to compliance. Then the next credential is the social KYC credential that was basically built by us. So instead of a KYC process using government credential, we are using social credentials, so proof about someone owning an account. And then after that was checked, social KYC forgets about the user and the verifiable credential is issued and used by the user. That works pretty easy. The user comes and wants a credential. Social KYC gives them a challenge like post XYZ on Twitter within the next 2 minutes. And if they do that, then they verified that they actually have access to that account. And then social KYC will, on the one hand, issue the credential, and on the other hand, as we have seen already, just anchor that on the blockchain. And if anybody ever wants to see that credential and wants to get proof about the person, they get the credential and they can check in the blockchain if that credential is still valid. Last but not least, the Axel Springer case. Axel Springer is also probably known by some of you as one of the largest publishing houses in the world, which is active in a lot of countries. And their aim is to make a Web3 credential that can be used for login. That is something that you can also use the social KYC credential for, but Axel Springer will then connect it probably to their media enterprise, and then that probably makes a big difference in trust. So how does that work? We have a user who goes to Axel Springer and says, give me a credential. Then Axel Springer says, here's your credential. You can now use it for all our services. So if you use their platforms, whichever platform you use, you can always use that Axel Springer credential. But what you can also do is you can probably use it for other services. So there might be other publishers having the same kind of issues with login, and they probably don't want to do the process themselves. They probably just say, I trust Axel Springer. If they checked it, then that's fine for me too. And so they are trusting Axel Springer and using the same credential for their logins, which is convenient because then you only have to go through the process once and can also reuse your access to different platforms with that credential. And that way, a whole new ecosystem is built up, because then you have probably just one credential to rule all kind of things, as you now have with your Facebook login, but you have it in a credential that you own without Facebook or anybody else tracking you. And that's it from my side. And if you have any questions or remarks, I'm happy to talk about them. Is there a micro?
Right.
Yeah.
Hello. Hello, Gustav. Thank you for your explanation. And I would like to know who has been the position of those companies that they are contributed to monetize data of user, and with your new solutions where they are have only a specific data for give access to their products to other users.
I'm not sure if I understood. So you want to know if there can be a single use case that you can just use it for that single use case, or?
For example, you show a square where you compare Web2 companies and how will be the Web3 companies. In Web2 companies, they are accustomed to monetize all of the data, for example, gender, age, name, all this, to extract and generate more money with that information. What will be the position of those companies that now want to do that transition to Web3, where they only to have one specific data of the user?
So your question is, why would anybody want a Web3 credential on their website when they could also get a lot of data by leaving it in a Web2 credential? I guess that's the force of the users. If users just refrain from using Web2 applications as much as they can, and just demand that Web3 applications are also an option, then I think over a certain time, then there will be no other possibility. And it doesn't mean that they cannot get the data. I mean, even if in a Web3 environment you want to share your data and you want to monetize that, that's also an option. I mean, if Facebook would, instead of a Web2, have a Web3 login, and they still want to know all your data that they don't need, and you agree to that and get some kind of token for it or whatever, then that's also an option. The difference is that then you make some money out of it instead of them, or you make at least a fraction of the money out of it. And I guess that users will want that sooner or later. The more people understand that this is an option, they will not give their data for free to everyone.
All right, and another super quickly question is about new companies that want to receive verifiable credentials. They need to be part of the ecosystem of the KILT network, or is it possible to share the credentials of the user without to be inside of the network?
So the KILT technology is open source. Everybody can use it. You can just go and do whatever you want. So if you want to make your own credential, you can just do that. You don't even have to ask us. And if you have troubles doing it, then you can just give us a call and we will help you. And basically everyone can build KILT credentials. The magic about the credential is that you need to trust the person who issues it. So if I issue you a credential for whatever, then probably nobody will trust me. So the business model around it would be that entities who already have trust or who are building up trust in a certain field will then issue credentials that other people will trust. If I don't know anything about you and I issue a credential, then that's basically worthless.
Thank you, Gustav.
Thank you for the presentation. I just have two quick questions. One is, do you envision the future where we will also have only like one issuer, for example, Deloitte, where of the credentials, and then the other case of the publisher, for example, they won't be needing their own credentials, but they will all simply trust Deloitte and their own credential system? And the second question is, do you have any plans or ideas or use cases to go cross-chain to EVM or any other chains?
So the first question, if I got it right, was if those credentials will interact with each other. I think that's why I used those three cases. I think you can interact with all of them. So it depends on what kind of trust level I need from you. I will ask you different credentials. For example, if I know you from Telegram but I've never seen you, then I might want your Telegram credential and some other credential for the purpose that we are interacting. So if I want to, I don't know, sell you something, then I might want to know, are you the person that I know? And if I don't know your real name, then I might use some other name. So if you have been commenting in some publishing, some Axel Springer thing under your Axel Springer name, then I might want your Axel Springer credential to make sure that this is you. And if I then want to sell you something, then I might still want a KYC credential to make sure that I also have the official data that I probably need for my bookkeeping or whatever to understand that these two credentials are the same person. And the second question, sorry?
Do you have any cross-chain use cases in mind?
We do have first cross-chain use cases with the Web3 name that I didn't present today. Web3 name is a name that you can create on KILT, but that you can also use for other accounts, for example, for an Ethereum account. I think there's going to be a lot more interoperability in the space in general, and I would hope that we will also have that, yes.
Thank you.
I love the idea, but I can see it very easily developing into a situation where you have a company that sits between the users and the identity provider and keeps tracks of how the users are using their credentials and sells this data, because I think it's going to be a point of friction for many people to pay for their own KYC, where they can just continue using Google or Facebook or whatever they already have. So with Web3 credentials, the way we built it, the issuer cannot keep track at all. It's working like the wallet that you know from the real world. You have your credentials in there and you can show that to someone or not, but the issuer doesn't know it. Our credentials are a piece of code that sits in your wallet, and nobody can access that credential unless you show it to them. And even if someone sees the credential and checks if it's valid, they only look it up in the blockchain. There's no traces of that in the blockchain. It's just a lookup function. No, more like a data aggregator that the users don't actually use the KILT identity, but they're calling some service that provided this identity for them because they don't want to pay for their KYC and somebody takes advantage of this man in the middle. If you want to provide data, you can always do that, but that's not tracking it. That's giving out your data for a purpose. If you want to go to a bank for a new account and you want to do a KYC, then of course you will have to give them your data, and then you will just do that. But the issuer doesn't know about that. I guess the point is that I think the fee for a KYC will be a point of friction for adoption. I guess that's my point. Yeah, but the fee is also variable. I mean, if I am a bank, right now, as a bank, I have 5 employees doing nothing but KYC. If I accept a KILT credential from Deloitte, for example, maybe I want to pay for my customers to do the process because I'm saving. I mean, it's just, I don't know what the business model, I don't know the price that Deloitte is going to want for a KYC credential because they're just building it. But
the whole ecosystem around it is interested in having those credentials. So it can be that the user pays, but it can also be that the verifiers just pay because they say, I want customers and I'm saving a lot of money on my internal processes, and then probably they pay, but that's up to them and probably also depends a bit on the use cases themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. Thank you for your awesome presentation. My question is very simple. Is it hard to convince the enterprises like Deloitte and the other ones to use KILT? And what's your strategy to convince they use KILT, blockchain, and DYD?
So I think it's getting easier to get companies to use us because there has been a leap in the standardization. So the verifiable credential and the DIDs are standardized, and ever since they are standardized, they know that whatever we are building is going to be compatible with what other people are building. That helps a lot. I'm guessing that also in enterprises, more and more people understand that blockchain is not just about shitcoins, but also about real business cases and about being able to rely on something, which is somehow a key factor. And I guess if you then think together that this also saves a lot of time and nerves to have such a credential, I'm guessing that more and more enterprises will jump on that train.
Okay, thank you. What do you think? Is it not so? These enterprises are usually don't want to take the control out of themselves to other stuffs like blockchain or another company. Are these enterprises don't afraid to take off the control? Like, you understand my question?
I think they are interested in the users using their services. So Deloitte right now, I don't know if they are doing a KYC process, but I'm guessing it's not the thing that you profit the most of. I mean, it's very manual and it's very one case by case. But the stuff that it's opening up is a lot more, and I think there's a lot of business to make. KILT has always been built around that you have someone that's trusted anyway, and they're using the trust to certify something. And that's good because we want trust also in the blockchain ecosystem. And especially, I think, with more and more regulation coming up, also in, for example, DeFi, I think that's really cool. I mean, if you imagine if you have DeFi completely outside of the system, it means that all the money that you make there, you can't get back to your bank. But if that is connected with a KYC process so that the bank can say, okay, this is money that you actually really earned there, and now it's coming back to your bank, that actually helps a lot because it doesn't help you to be rich from trading or whatever if you can't use the money in the real world, because then, I mean, of course you can use your coins within some field of people, but if you, I don't know, want to buy a house, then normally you have to pay in fiat, and that helps if you can connect those different worlds of income, for example.
Okay, thank you for your answers. Thanks.
Hi, I have another question about the transactions. When a user shares a credential, what happened with that credential and with that information? Who is the owner? And for example, if I share my nationality or a credential of my nationality, the company who received that credential keeps that information?
So the information in the credential is always yours. So the credential as such is always yours. But of course, all the information that you give out to someone, they have it. I mean, you can't black man it away, man in black it away when someone knows your nationality. They can, I mean, if I know your name, I can always write it down in an Excel sheet and then I know it forever. But the credential as such is just in your wallet, so your job sort of is to just show it to the people that you want to show it, or to cover up the stuff that you don't want to show. I mean, if you go to a shop and you just need to prove your age, then you probably will show just that part of your credential that shows your birth year, and you probably will not show your name because they don't need your name, and they might remember. Or
but that information is associated to the DID, and maybe you can collect different credentials associated to an DID and construct a complete profile about that information.
So the DID doesn't contain any information about you. It's just like a hash. It's just random stuff that then represents you. And the credential is connected to your DID, that's right. But then your DID, you only show the parts that you want. We always have selective disclosure. And if you have 50 fields of information, you just want to show 2 of them, then you just hide the rest.
All right, thank you.
All right, it looks like this was it. Thank you very much.